Welcome to Strategy Execution Unlocked and the first episode in our new series, Practitioners Unfiltered. In this series, we'll meet with the Strategy Execution Forum's founding members who represent practitioners from different roles and functions across varying industries. During these unfiltered conversations, we'll discuss the strategy execution challenges these practitioners have encountered and the solutions they're implementing to master both the art and science of strategy execution. Today, I'm excited to welcome Vikrant Thakare to the show. Vikrant is an enterprise transformation executive, 20 years of experience leading large-scale change across healthcare operations, technology, and strategy. Vikrant, thanks for joining me today.
Well, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you. But maybe let's start with what strategy execution means to you, Vikrant, and the different roles maybe you've held in the space over the years.
Sure. So for me, strategy execution, is really not project management. It's really the operating system of the enterprise. I think it's how an organization, turns intent into impact. And I have seen, strategy execution evolve to be much more holistic. Today, it's more about, connecting people, processes, data, incentive, technology, and then building the capabilities that allow organizations to actually sustain the change. And basically, I think what's changed the most over the years for me is that execution used to be kind of about delivering projects. Now it's more about organizations build a muscle, a project ends, but a capability compounds. And that shift has really reshaped how I think about the work in this area.
I love the way you put that. So when you think about some of the challenges you've seen developing the strategy execution muscle in the organization over your time, what are some that come to mind?
Well, plenty of challenges. Well, one of the reason I find healthcare so fascinating and so challenging is that it's a highly fragmented system. Every service line has its own workflow, its own system, its own regulatory realities, if you will. So just getting alignment on definitions or on a data model or even what good looks like, that can take some work. So, but that's, I think these challenges are kind of prevalent in other industries as well, but more pronounced in healthcare. But one of the biggest challenge, which I think is much more pronounced in healthcare, is it's really isn't technology or the infrastructure. It's the human side of it. And the reality is, the clinicians are stretched thin. Care teams are really under pressure, and unless they kind of understand the why behind what matters to them, adoption really doesn't happen. So one of the quotes that I largely share with the teams or even with the start of the project when I implement change management, that's something that really needs to be a back of the mind for everyone is the chains of habits are too light to be felt until they are too heavy to be broken. And I think it's the truth. If the tool doesn't make a clinician's job easier, it just becomes a distraction, an overhead, or just a noise. And that's where really one of my passions is how we integrate AI into in healthcare. And that's where that conversation to me is so interesting right now. And as you have kind of in the past recent months or so, what we are seeing is the market is waking up to the fact that the hype around AI is far ahead of the actual value that it's delivering. So you really can build an advanced model, but if the clinician doesn't use it, the value is zero. you know and in all of those, in my mind at least, that intelligence has to be embedded so deeply in the workflow that it just feels like a part of a care experience. And that's where I really think transformation happens.
That's interesting. I mean, we talk at Strategy XF about mastering both the art and science of strategy execution, right? And I think the science represents, different frameworks, different best practices to ensure, all investments and folks are aligned with strategy. I think the art of that brings into what you said. It's the human dimension, right? And
Exactly.
I think that's a huge aspect to focus on, right? Because whether it
Yeah.
is the human dimension of adoption, or whether it
Hmm.
is adoption of a new tool or functionality that you're talking about, or whether
Yeah.
it's the human dimension of just wanting to adhere to a new strategy execution process that's being established in the organization and not push back against the alignment and visibility that process or capability
Hmm.
will deliver, versus just going back to your old way of executing.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
I mean, one of the things I talked about a lot is, especially if we think about the adoption of strategy execution best practices across the organization, it's often the need to ensure that there's executive buy-in to be able to drive that across the organization, right?
Hmm.
How
Exactly.
have you found that in the organizations that you've worked?
Yeah. So something that I have learned is that execution lives and dies based on executive sponsorship. I think leaders don't invest in tasks. I think they invest in outcomes. So when I speak, to the executive team, I don't talk about activities or milestones or similar stuff. I really try to focus on how something will impact the bottom line, how what's the ROI, how certain initiatives are going to reduce risk or improve productivity and so far, or how it's going to give some of the clinicians their time back or make their job easier. So I think that kind of resonates a little better. And I think equally important is also making the invisible visible. And what I mean by that is, once leaders can actually see the system, like the holistic system, basically the bottlenecks, the dependencies, the potential, or the current value leakage, I think there is a tendency to lean in a bit more. And in my experience, I think just that visualization, the system visualization of that entire holistic system changes the conversation a bit, and that has worked really really well.
It's interesting you talk about value leakage, because again, that's something we talk about a lot at Strategy F. My feeling is, having been in the space as long as you, that poor or suboptimal strategy execution capabilities is resulting in value loss. So
Yeah.
either value being lost outright, or value being deferred based on delays or
Hmm.
other things in major initiatives. I've often found that I'm not sure that the executive team C-suite understand the implication of suboptimal in terms of it is holding their business back, right?
Hmm.
Um, have you been able to show your executive team that value is at risk without developing that strategy execution muscle in the organization? And if so, how are you able to get that buy-in?
I think to kind of lead to what you're saying, I think anytime you are orchestrating across operations, clinical, compliance, IT, finance, some of the functions, core functions of your business, uh, 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 there is a bit of I would say in a politics, not in a bad sense. Politics in a sense, less as a conflict and more of a competing perspectives that needs alignment. So I think if we start there, I think strategy execution, in my mind, is an orchestration of is basically an orchestration function. It's not a solo. It's a symphony, and getting those players to work together, I think is a part of the job. So I think just I think helping to facilitate that, manage it, and show it in smaller sprints or iteration. I think it goes a long way. Um, um, and and I think holistically, one of the things that I try to kind of implement is, this is the place, or the strategy execution office is the place where priorities happen, where governance is shaped, where capabilities are developed, where dependencies are managed, where risks are anticipated early, and so on. So it feels like less like a compliance function and more like an organization North Star or a GPS, if you will, sensing changes, recalibrating, and keeping the enterprise aligned on really what matters. So I think if you continuously kind of build a narrative around the why, I think you tend to get the buy-in more. People kind of are invested more when they try to see when they see the outcomes quickly, and all the priorities or initiatives aligned to the enterprise strategy. I think it's a good story to tell, and just keep on kind of, it's kind of rinse and repeat thing, and going back to that narrative goes a long way.
Yeah, I like talk a lot about orchestration. I mentioned also North Star. It's a great way of looking at it. So
Hmm.
that enterprise function, strategy execution office, enterprise PMO,
Hmm.
transformation office, whatever you call it, is a function to orchestrate alignment across the
Hmm.
organization. But
Hmm.
hopefully with the backing of the C-suite, right, to give it a bit more teeth, right, in terms of
Hmm.
driving that
Hmm.
focus, right? Because again,
Hmm.
it's not about necessarily, the strategy execution office being in charge of all the investments, but ensuring all investments align with the strategy. And going back to your North Star comment, right, I think
Hmm.
there's kind of two bookends I've mentioned before where the executive team is incredibly important. That is
Exactly.
ensuring the strategy is clearly communicated across the organization,
Hmm.
which again I think
Hmm.
is one of the major roles of that enterprise function. And then ensuring that there is going to be accountability in terms of the results. So the bookends of setting strategy and measuring results. And then that enterprise function needs to ensure that that is driven across the organization, right? As simple as the decomposition of enterprise strategy or corporate strategy down into, functional or line of business strategies that obviously,
Hmm.
each function needs to do their own thing, but show how that is aligned back. Now, it, heard you mention change, talk, obviously about milestones, dependencies, and other things that relate to kind of the sort of program management aspect
Hmm.
of things.
Hmm.
What are the other roles that you think of the enterprise PMO or the strategy execution office? Because again at Strategy S we talk about five critical processes that function needs to have
Hmm.
expertise in, or at least bring into building a lean governance model. So being portfolio management or strategic portfolio management being one, business architecture and enterprise architecture the other two, in terms of understanding the operating fabric of the business, and of course project execution or whatever flavor, and change management. How
Hmm.
important is the aspect of getting a understanding of not just how the discretionary spend, so portfolio management and project execution lines with strategy, but how the operating spend relates to strategy and the role of architecture?
I think it's incredibly important. I think we need to uh, tie the operating spend to the overall strategy. I think that in my mind, like when you start kind of building the strategy for next year, right? There is a specific capital budget that is allocated to it, and specific initiatives that are associated with it. So breaking down those, the strategy into portfolio of smaller projects that kind of aligns or kind of produces this complete story of how that goal or a vision or how that enterprise strategy will come together. It's incredibly important. So I think that's where this discipline is evolving more. Nowadays organizations are wanting the execution leader to be part technologist, part operator, part cultural change agent, and so on, and somebody who's having that holistic view of both on the technology side and equal footing, what I say, on the business and technology, and the headwinds and the tailwinds of an organization. I think it's incredibly important to kind of bring that perspective so that there is less of a sunk cost, and there are iterations where 30, 60, 90 days iterations where we see if some of the initiatives are bringing values or not. And we fail fast if we need to, so that as I said earlier, we focus on the right initiatives.
In terms of the orchestration and of work across the organization and the role of the enterprise function that we discussed, do you have examples of where that enterprise function has built partnerships with what I call the underlying control offices? So like the I don't know, the functional domain PMOs that may exist in different parts of the organization, IT, other shared services, business units, right? Is that something that you see in terms of needing to sort of broker that partnership between the different control offices in the organization?
Yeah, I definitely see that aspect of uh, orchestration kind of evolving, and more and more you see organization kind of formalizing the execution as a C-suite capability, whether it shows up as like a chief transformation officer, or whatever you want to call it, in terms of somebody who is over the overall execution. Because overall, I think complexity is only increasing, and organization needs somebody who can orchestrate across the whole system. And that's where this function, with with if the appropriate discipline is followed, can orchestrate across business line, partner with, it's kind of a bridge between strategy, the business, and operations overall, to really have set a kind of a clear path on what it really takes to execute on the overall strategy.
No, absolutely. And I just wrote a paper on this next thing yesterday. So when we talk about orchestration, right?
Hmm.
You need a framework or set of controls, governance
Hmm.
controls to do that, right? I think that over the years, governance has got a kind of bad rap, right, in terms of yeah, being overly bureaucratic or
Hmm.
slowing things down,
Hmm.
too much red tape
Hmm.
versus governance actually being an accelerant for the organization, like brakes on a car, right? It's there to make you go faster. Um, Part of that, from my perspective, is the need to establish the kind of minimal enterprise controls, at that corporate enterprise function level, but also
Hmm.
then embrace autonomy of execution,
Hmm.
autonomy, therefore a level of autonomy of governance, right, within
Hmm.
each of the other underlying portfolios.
Yeah.
What's your experience there in terms of the right balance of governance to be able to, accelerate things effectively to obviously, plug the gap, plug the leaks in terms of value and accelerate value?
Yeah, I think governance is incredibly important, and to your point, what you mentioned, it needs to be and kind of an independent function, but also be able to kind of orchestrate across different functions of the business. So basically, the governance functions that have worked well for me is, um, throughout the year, when we try to put together a strategy for next year, we get ideas from across the company, and then we help the execution leader, or in this case, our PMO, helps with kind of preparing a business case in terms of how those ideas align to the overall strategy, what's the ROI, how it's going to help with productivity, how it's going to help with easing the load for clinicians, and impacting the bottom lines and so forth, just tying down to some of those critical key metrics that we are after. And then, I think one of the things that's incredibly important is for the executive teams and the business leaders who wants to basically pursue those ideas, sit together and come up with kind of a roadmap of what those ideas kind of look like for next year. And what has worked for me is creating that governance functions of maybe per quarter we meet together and reflect on how those initiatives are going, where are those challenges in execution, or what additional help is needed throughout that initiative has largely worked. So there are certain controls. If it's not performing well, if there is something, if it's a capital thing, we can assign more capital. If it's resources, we can assign more resources. But there are set guidelines to maybe stop that initiative, deprioritize it, so that we reduce some of the sunk costs. So I think decision making based on certain key controls that we can provide to the executive team, facilitate across the ecosystem, and provide a kind of an independent narrative on how holistically how all of these functions are working. I think it's incredibly important. And I think may have mentioned earlier, I think you will see organization formalize execution as a kind of a C-suite capability. I think that's where it gives us that kind of independence that you were kind of mentioning earlier, because complexity is only increasing, and an organization needs somebody who can orchestrate across the whole ecosystem. As I mentioned or may have mentioned earlier, is the need the execution leader to be part technologist, part operator, part cultural change agent who can kind of understand the headwinds, tailwinds, and so far, and provide that an overall view, a holistic view for everybody to kind of make an appropriate decision.
That makes sense. So, as you look to the future, but maybe look through the lens of what's the evolution you see over the next few years in terms of strategy execution at large for
Mhm.
organizations, or even what is your evolution and roadmap for your organization? Um, yeah, what do you see impacting the strategy execution space over in the upcoming years?
Yeah, great question. I really think we are entering one of the most transformative periods in this discipline, and I'll kind of kind of focus from the AI lens. I think that the big shift is AI augmented execution. I think AI is going to help us model scenarios, predict bottlenecks, optimize resources, and create, if you will, the digital twins that let us test decisions before we make them. And I think leaders who understand how we combine AI with execution discipline, and how how it's more of an augmentation function, are going to move faster and with more confidence. And the second shift, I think, it's just from the overall perception standpoint, is AI in healthcare. It's not going to be a discipline in itself. I think it's going to be an holistic infrastructure. To give maybe an analogy, in the past we used to separate, digital banking and banking, and now it's just banking. So I think AI eventually, AI in healthcare, in my mind, it's just going to be healthcare. But overall, for that to work, organizations need to build trust, a good governance model, and a really strong execution muscle. So I think those two, and then along with that, as I kind of mentioned earlier, the third area is basically the behavioral design. I think what you had also mentioned earlier is the change management. The way it was, or the way we used to think about change management. I think it doesn't work anymore. We really have to design change in a way that it reduces friction, reduces the cognitive load, and helps people kind of build new habits. And I think that's where the three areas that I think, along with what I mentioned earlier, is just formalizing the execution as a C-suite capabilities. I think those are the areas that I think are going to be transformative, and how we, and especially in the healthcare space, and how we think about execution in the near future.
That's great. Well, I want to thank you for taking the time today to share your perspectives. I look forward to collaborating you more in the future, and in the Strategy Execution Forum as a founding member. But thanks for your time.
Likewise. Thanks for having me.
Okay.